Hi, Armand Diaz back with another video astroblog, this time talking about Saturn's move into Scorpio. Saturn's going to be in Scorpio from October 5th, 2012, all the way out to the end of 2014, and then because of retrograde, he'll dip back in to Scorpio in 2015 for a couple of months in the summertime, and then be on his way to Sagittarius. What does this mean for us all? Because where Saturn goes, we collectively move our attention. For example, Saturn in Libra. Well, Saturn in Libra is it's a little bit different. You know, Saturn and Libra, they really get along very well together. They're both about the rules. It's a very rule-oriented sign, and Saturn's a very rule-oriented planet. So the issues in Saturn and Libra, very much legal issues, relationship issues with Libra, of course, very strong. And what do we find? We find a lot of laws, Libra, and Saturn, about relationship, Libra. And so the question, for example, of gay marriage is kind of the flagship issue for Saturn and Libra. But we hammer things out with Saturn and Libra sort of, on the table. We have different views of things, we have different ideas about things, but we hammer them out on the table. It's not quite that way with Saturn and Scorpio. Saturn and Scorpio is a little bit more under the table type of thing. Saturn in Scorpio is a little bit more hidden, a little more the spy, a little bit more espionage type of thing that goes on. We'll also see a move from the interest in relationship on a sort of collective societal level. We'll see a move from relationship to sex. Now, last time Saturn was in Scorpio, which was in the mid-'80s, began around 1983, it really helped to put an end to the sexual revolution. I don't think we should picture anything quite so dramatic this time around, because then Uranus had been through the sign, and Pluto, of course, was making his entry into Scorpio, and that had a much more significant effect. We'd have to go back to the 1950s to see the example of Saturn in Scorpio without Pluto also being there. Now, whether we look at the 1950s, the early 50s, around 1952, 53, 54, around that time, or whether we look at the 1980s, 30 years later, one thing that we can see is that paranoia is something that is not uncommon with Saturn in the sign of Scorpio. Saturn brings up a lot of fears. Saturn is sort of touchy. Where Saturn goes, our attention goes, but not necessarily all that willingly. There's often something we kind of don't want to deal with, and Scorpio gives us plenty of stuff we don't want to deal with. So when we look at the 1980s, AIDS was a serious problem, but our reaction to it was one of extraordinary fear. In the 1950s, we had the communist scare was a big thing. It was sort of it was the end of the McCarthy era, actually, when Saturn was in Scorpio. But it was after the Second World War. There was a great deal of fear. We were very afraid of atomic power. We had all these big, grasshoppers and crabs and stuff like that in the movies were walking around terrorizing us, because that was a scorpionic issue that we had fears about. And so fears about power issues are very likely with Saturn and Scorpio. This time around, I imagine that they're going to kind of be focused on the power structures of society, governments and banks and large corporations. No sooner does Saturn get into Scorpio than he's going to sextile Pluto in Capricorn. Now, a sextile is considered to be a pretty nice relationship, and it's going to be even nicer, sweeter, you might say, because it's in what we call in astrology mutual reception. Saturn is in Pluto's sign of Scorpio, while Pluto is in Saturn's sign of Capricorn. So everything's going to be great. You see, well, not really great. I mean, optimistically, your inner optimist can tell you this is going to be about a smooth transition of power and power structures. Your inner optimist can say that. And I think it will be about the transition of power and power structures. It's just the smooth part that I don't really see. First of all, Uranus and Pluto are still squaring off between Aries and Capricorn, and that is not a smooth aspect in any way, and it is, in a sense, the more powerful aspect. What I see with Saturn and Pluto in this tight relationship with each other, and they'll be in this tight relationship from the winter of 2012 through the spring of 2013, so it happens pretty quickly after Saturn gets into the sign, is a potential for this kind of collusion between power structures. This is kind of like when the mafia families get together and say, you know, we shouldn't really be fighting with each other. We should sort of be have a unified front. What you're very likely to see, I think, is banking structures, other power structures, the government, large corporations, all kind of closing ranks and saying, you know, we perceive a threat out there. It's Uranus and Aries. It is Pluto and Capricorn itself. But they're saying we perceive a threat out there. We perceive a change is potential in the status quo. And we're not crazy about that. We don't really want that to happen. And so, you know, rather than I should fight with you and you should fight with me, let's have a unified front against those forces of change. And so what we're very likely to get is a sort of consolidation of power structures for a time. And it may turn out to be, in fact, I would kind of guess that it's actually this consolidation of the power structures, this intensification, this too much power in the same place that winds up causing the greatest amount of change. It's more likely to be a kind of implosion than an explosion. Or an implosion followed by an explosion. I don't really know much about explosions and implosions. I'm not like a demolitions type of person. I don't know. But implosions, things inwards. Saturn is lead. It's a container. Capricorn is lead container, and yet Scorpio is the nuclear power. And so you contain the power, make it stronger. But you know what happens? Sometimes you get a bit of a meltdown. And I think that that's probably what Saturn in Scorpio is doing on the world stage. It's contributing to that meltdown. It's pushing things together. It's pushing the forces that are in power together. It's consolidating them. It's making them into one big solid mass that really can't function. Now, what does Saturn in Scorpio mean for the individual signs? Well, if you're a Scorpio, it's not fun having Saturn in the house. Just ask the Libras, they'll tell you. It's a time of questioning who you are, what you're about. Are you living? Is your life on track with your sole purpose? There's times when you say yes, and there's times when you say, maybe not so much. And that's kind of tough. Now, if you're one of the other fixed signs, that is Aquarius, Taurus, or Leo, you have a little bit of the same thing, only it's not quite as direct. It maybe comes from other people, or maybe it comes a little bit more reflectively, a little bit more distance for you. But Scorpio is going to feel it most intensely. Libra, you will be happy to have Saturn out of the house. You will feel better. It is good. It might, however, give you a little bit of a financial worry. Usually Saturn, it gives you something to worry about without necessarily causing any type of particular disaster, although with our economy being what it is. Libra will, however, feel a little of the pressure come off, although, like the other signs, Aries and Capricorn and Cancer, the other cardinal signs, yeah, the pressure of Saturn is off, but the pressure of Uranus, Pluto is still there, so you're not exactly getting a free ride. Cancer does get a little bit more of a boost because Saturn is going to be in an easy aspect to your sign, just as Capricorn will get a little bit more of a boost from that. It'll be helpful in terms of building things up, let's say financially or in business. That may be particularly true for Pisces, who may benefit from business, also from education. Gemini, well, there's not a lot to say about this particularly. It's liable to be a little bit awkward, a little bit of a feeling that somehow things are not quite right in some sector of your life. You might have a little trouble just having fun. And I'm sorry, I know how you guys like that. Virgo, you'll be fine. It is a good opportunity to build up things in terms of basic study and skills, and that's your stuff. That's good. So each of the signs is going to be dealing with Saturn in Scorpio a little bit differently, but the more important thing is how we'll be dealing with it collectively. That's an issue that it's like the rain. It comes down on everybody. Whether or not you have an umbrella, that's up to you.